So forgiving others is such an important topic, and it has such far-reaching implications for our own mental health and for our relationships. But it's important when we talk about forgiveness that we understand that there's two different types of forgiveness. There's pseudo-forgiveness or fake forgiveness, and then there's real, deep, genuine forgiveness. And the mistake that many people make when they're forgiving others is they don't do the real forgiveness process. They actually do more of the pseudo forgiveness. And this comes from a variety of different sources. Many religions tell people you just have to forgive, and some people hear this from their parents. Just forgive your brother and move on, and just let's just sweep it all under the rug and be done with this. And I like to call that the push a button method to forgiveness. The reality is, as human beings, we don't have a forgiveness button. So when we do that, when we just try to tell ourselves, okay, it's water under the bridge, I forgive you, we're not going to think about it anymore, what you're actually doing is you're ignoring the feelings that you have about the harm that was done to you. And if you ignore those feelings, they don't just go away. Feelings are an energy. Then when it gets generated, it has to be processed. It has to be worked through. If we just ignore it, it doesn't just magically evaporate. It just gets shoved down in our psyche, which leads to resentment. It leads to us holding grudges. It can lead to us consciously or unconsciously treating that person in ways that really aren't fair. And all along we're telling ourselves that we've forgiven them, when in reality we just tried to, make a mental shift real quick into, forgetting and forgiving. And what I encourage, rather than doing that, is actually engaging in more of a process of real forgiveness. Dr. Enright is probably the psychologist who has studied this process most thoroughly. And what he found is to really truly forgive somebody, we need to first really recognize what they did that harmed us and why that was so upsetting to us. We also need to face the depth of our anger about what they did. And that can be a very challenging process for people because we've been trained really not to acknowledge our anger. As little kids growing up, when we get angry, we're not rewarded for it. We're usually slapped on the hand or punished, sent to our room for being angry. And so now, when we get angry as adults, we tend to freak out about that. And so sometimes it takes the help of a mental health professional to get us to reconnect with those feelings of anger so that we can fully experience it. Fully experiencing anger is not a simple thing. It involves several stages. We have to first own and accept the fact that we are angry without, minimizing it or waffling about that. We have to then feel that anger in our body. And there's actually a very specific physiological pathway of anger that we have to connect with. If we don't connect with that physiological pathway of anger, if we don't connect with the physical sensations of anger, we can't really fully process it. And again, that's something that may take the assistance of a mental health professional. But once we connect with those sensations, then we want to look at the motor impulses that go with that anger. And these tend to get repressed almost immediately because we're afraid that if we actually feel them, we're going to act on them, which may have actually been a reality when we were children. But as adults, we have fully developed frontal lobes, we have really good impulse control, and we can feel those motor impulses, we can be aware of them, we can even play them out in our minds without acting on them in real life. And by playing them out and working through them, we're able to really drain that anger and that rage from our psyches, which is really important because otherwise it gets shoved under the rug and it just festers. And that's what leads to resentment. That's what leads to holding grudges. That's really what gets us stuck, right? So when we process all that anger, we're able to purge it from our systems, which really helps us to then get to a place where we can then forgive the person who harmed us. Then after that energy has gone out, we can then step back and look at the situation without so much emotional charge. But is that enough to truly forgive? I think that the next step really involves assertiveness. So it probably involves going to that person and having a conversation about what they did that harmed you, using a very constructive language and having a conversation about the concrete behavior that bothered you, how it made you feel, what you would like to see them do different going forward, and also some expression of love, letting them know that you're not attacking them, but you're trying to do this so that you can improve the relationship and you can improve that bond. And if you can get the person to take in what you're saying, and you can get them to then, agree to cooperate with you going forward, then you're much more likely to really be able to, bury that hatchet and forgive the person. And how do we know if we've forgiven? Well, there's really no meter that we can check in and check and see, is it in the forgiveness zone, or am I still holding on to resentment? But one of the ways that you might be able to tell is when you're reminded of the harm that was done to you. Do you have a visceral reaction of anger, or do you get anxious? Because if you're getting anxious, that might be a sign that there's still some anger down there that's getting covered up by the anxiety. Or do you just feel a sense of peace? Do you feel like that's water under the bridge, bygones are bygones, and, well, you're not happy about it, that it happened, you're not harboring any feelings about it, But then it's also important to maintain that forgiveness, is if the person starts to reoffend going forward, to just really quickly use your assertiveness skills and let them know, hey, remember what we talked about? You're doing it again. Could you please, try to keep an eye on that? And that will prevent future reoffending, so that we can maintain that good feeling of forgiveness and we can maintain that goodwill going forward.